The envelope was on the table when I arrived. I noticed it because it was the only thing on the table. Everything else in that kitchen, the imported marble counters, the crystal fruit bowl, the coffee machine that cost more than my truck, was arranged with the particular precision of a woman who had spent 50 years making sure that every object in her space was exactly where she had decided it should be. The envelope was different. It had been placed in the center of the kitchen table, the way you place something you are not yet sure what to do with. Not carelessly, deliberately uncertain. Her name was written on the front, in handwriting I did not recognize. Not her name. Mine. Chukwuemeka Obiora, my full name. The name my mother had given me, and that nobody except my grandmother and official documents ever used. Everyone else called me Emeka. Even the clients who had been bringing their cars to Obiora Auto on Ogi Road in Enugu for 15 years called me Emeka. The woman whose kitchen I was standing in had called me Emeka from the second week after we met, when she had said, with the direct calm that was simply how she moved through the world, "Chukwuemeka is too many syllables for a Tuesday morning. I'll call you Emeka." I had said, "Most people do." She had said, "Most people are probably right." That had been 14 months ago. I was standing in her kitchen now at 7 in the morning because she had called me at 6:45 and asked me to come, and because I did not say no to Adaeze Okonkwo when she called at 6:45 in the morning, not because she had power over me. She was careful never to use what power she had in the direction of people she respected. But because in 14 months she had called me at unusual hours exactly twice, and both times it had mattered. The envelope with my name on it was not good news. I understood this the way you understand things that have not yet been explained, not through logic, but through the particular quality of silence in a room that has recently held something significant. I set down the bag of tools I had brought. She had mentioned a leak under the kitchen sink, which was why I had a reason to be here at 7 in the morning that the housekeeper could accept without confusion, and I looked at the envelope. I did not touch it. I waited. She came into the kitchen 4 minutes later. She was dressed already. Adaeze Okonkwo did not receive people in her house undressed. It was one of the things I had learned about her early, in a dark blouse and tailored trousers, and the small gold earrings she wore on days when she was going somewhere that mattered. Her hair was natural and close-cropped, and she wore it without apology, the way she wore most things. She was 63 years old. She had built Okonkwo Holdings from a single textile import business her late husband had started and left unfinished when he died 22 years ago, into a conglomerate that operated across manufacturing, real estate, and agricultural processing in 4 states. She had done it alone, with 2 children under 12, and a board of men who had assumed for the first 3 years that she was a placeholder until someone more suitable could be found. She had been many things in her professional life. Suitable was not the word anyone used about her anymore. She looked at me. She looked at the envelope. "You saw it," she said. "Yes," I said. "Sit down," she said. I sat. She sat across from me. The morning light came through the kitchen window in the specific way it came through windows in Enugu in November, pale and slightly cool, the harmattan beginning its approach, but not yet fully arrived. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Before you hear it from someone else." "Tell me," I said. She looked at the envelope. Then she looked at me. And she told me. What she told me took 11 minutes, and when she finished, the kitchen was quiet, and the morning light was the same, and the coffee machine was making its preliminary sounds, and the world outside was going about its business with the indifference it always brought to the moments that changed things. I sat with what she had told me for a long time. Then I said, "How long have you known?" 3 weeks, she said. "And the will?" "Signed 2 weeks ago." She held my gaze. "Emeka, I need you to understand why." I do understand, I said. You haven't let me explain. You don't need to explain to me, I said. I understand. She looked at me, and in her face, behind the composure and the stillness that she brought to everything, there was something I had only seen from her 3 times in 14 months. Something that was not quite vulnerability, because Adaeze Okonkwo was not a woman built for vulnerability in the conventional sense. Something more precise than that. The expression of someone who has made a decision alone that she wishes she had not had to make alone, and who is now finally not alone with it. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, I said. Tell me what you need. She looked at the envelope. I need you to keep this between us, she said. For now, until I decide the right moment. Of course, I said. She nodded. Then she stood and went to make the coffee. And I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope that had my name on it, and the knowledge of what she had told me, and the specific, weighted understanding that I was now carrying something that other people would, when they found out, consider it impossible for me to have been trusted with. I was a mechanic from Ogi Road. What I was holding was a secret that could change the lives of people who had never once considered that a mechanic from Ogi Road was capable of holding anything of consequence. They were wrong. But they were going to be a long time finding out. If you have never been trusted with something important by someone important, and known that the trust itself was the most significant thing anyone had ever given you, stay with me, because this story begins here, and it does not end the way anyone planned. I had met Adaeze Okonkwo 16 months before that kitchen morning, on a Wednesday afternoon, when the harmattan dust was thick on the Ogi Road, and the sun had that particular flat, pressing quality that comes in November, when the sky turns a pale copper, and the air tastes of distance. Her convoy had stopped outside my workshop. Not broken down, stopped. 3 vehicles, the middle one a black Prado that had seen better years, but was maintained with the specific care of something functional rather than impressive. The lead driver had come in, asking for a mechanic to look at a brake feel issue on the primary vehicle. Not an emergency, he said, but the owner wanted it checked before a long drive the following morning. I had gone out myself. The Prado was what it was. A vehicle that had been used hard and maintained properly, which told me something about its owner before I had seen the owner. People who use expensive things hard and maintain them properly are a specific kind of person. Not the kind who replaces things to signal success. The kind who believes in the full life of what they have. I was under the front of the vehicle when the rear door opened. I heard the footsteps. I heard the specific sound of someone who walks with authority. Not loudly, not aggressively, but with the particular rhythm of someone whose feet have never learned to ask permission for the space they occupy. The feet stopped near my legs. "What are you finding?" said a voice. "Brake fluid contamination," I said from under the vehicle. "It's absorbed moisture over time. The feel you're experiencing, soft pedal, slight delay, it's the fluid, not the hardware. Straightforward fix." "How long?" the voice said. 40 minutes if you have the right fluid. Longer if I need to source it." "I have the right fluid," said the voice. "My driver carries emergency supplies." I slid out from under the vehicle. She was standing over me with the expression of someone who has heard the correct diagnosis and is confirming it with the look rather than the words. She was tall, dark-skinned, with close-cropped hair and eyes that processed information with the speed of someone who had spent decades making decisions in rooms where slow processing was a liability. She looked at me, not at my work clothes, not at my hands, not at the workshop behind me. At me. The specific look of someone who was assessing the person rather than the category. "You knew what it was before you looked," she said. "The driver described the symptoms," I said. "The diagnosis was probable before I confirmed." "Most mechanics confirm first and diagnose second," she said. "Most mechanics charge for the confirmation. I said. Something moved in her face. Almost a smile. Almost. Fix it, she said. I'll wait. She waited in the workshop, not in her vehicle, not on her phone, in the workshop. She sat in the plastic chair I kept for clients who wanted to watch the work, and she watched with the focused attention of someone who was genuinely interested in what they were watching, while I flushed the system and replaced the fluid and bled the lines. 42 minutes. When I was done, I told her what I had done and what she should watch for, and what the service interval should be going forward. She listened to every word. Then she paid exactly what I quoted, without negotiation, which in Enugu is either a sign of complete trust or complete indifference. And in her case, I suspected it was neither. It was the specific practicality of someone who had decided the price was fair and had no interest in performing the ritual of bargaining for its own sake. She gave her card to a driver and told him to give it to me. I looked at the card after they left. Ades Okonkwo, Chairman Okonkwo Holdings. I set it on the tool wall. 3 days later, her fleet manager called. The fleet contract was the beginning of the professional relationship, which was what it was for the first 8 months. Professional, structured, conducted through the fleet manager with occasional direct contact from Ades herself on specific technical questions that her manager couldn't answer to her satisfaction. She asked good questions, specific, technical, informed by someone who had read the maintenance reports carefully enough to know when something in a report didn't match what she understood about the vehicle in question. I answered them directly, without the padding that people sometimes added when speaking to someone powerful, because my father had taught me that speaking clearly to people, regardless of their status, was a form of respect rather than a form of disrespect. And I had found in 38 years of living that the people worth respecting tended to agree. The first time she came to the workshop personally on a non-emergency basis was in the 5th month. She arrived without announcement on a Friday afternoon, dismissed her driver for 2 hours, and sat in the plastic chair and asked me to walk her through the service schedule for the entire fleet. I walked her through it. She asked 12 questions over 90 minutes. 10 of the questions were about maintenance methodology. 2 were not. The first non-maintenance question was, "How long have you been on this road?" 15 years, I said. My father started the workshop. I took it over when he got sick. How old were you? 23, I said. She looked at the workshop. It's better organized than when my father started his business, she said. He had 12 years of chaos before the business made sense. Yours looks like it made sense from the beginning. My father was organized, I said. I kept what worked. She nodded. The second non-maintenance question came at the end of the afternoon, when she was standing at the entrance, pulling on her jacket. Do you ever think about expanding? She said. I think about it, I said. I haven't found a reason compelling enough yet. She looked at me. What would be compelling enough? She said. I thought about it honestly. If expanding meant doing the same work better, I said. Not if it meant doing more work worse. She held my gaze for a moment. Then she said, That's either wisdom or limitation. I haven't decided which. Both, probably, I said, depending on the day. She left without resolving the question. She came back the following Friday, and the Friday after that. And over the weeks that followed, the Friday visits became the most honest hours of my working week, and I suspect, from what she told me later, that they were the most honest hours of hers. What I came to understand about Adaeze Okonkwo, over Friday afternoons, and occasional phone calls, and one memorable Tuesday evening when a crisis with the fleet's largest vehicle had kept us both at the workshop until 9 o'clock, and we had eaten suya from the roadside cellar, because neither of us had thought about dinner, was that she was a woman who had built an enormous life around an enormous purpose and had, somewhere in the process, lost easy access to the ordinary things. Not deliberately, not even knowingly at first. But the machinery of a life like hers, the board meetings and the negotiations and the staff and the drivers and the security and the public expectations of someone whose name was on buildings, had gradually displaced the ordinary the way rising water displaces air. Not violently, just completely. She had 2 children. Her son, Chidi, was 34 years old and ran the Abuja operations of the holding company with what appeared, from the outside, to be competence, and what appeared, from his mother's careful descriptions, to be a combination of genuine capability and a profound need for approval that manifested, when the approval was not forthcoming, as resentment. Her daughter, Ngozi, was 31, based in Lagos, and had the kind of relationship with her mother that is common between 2 people who love each other deeply and cannot spend more than 4 days in the same space without the love producing friction. Ngozi had ideas about how the company should grow that were different from her mother's ideas. She was not wrong. Neither was her mother. The difference was the source of most of what was difficult between them. Adayez spoke about both children with the particular careful love of a parent who has spent decades trying to do right by people who needed different things, not all of which she had known how to give. She spoke about her late husband, Obiora Okonkwo, who had died 22 years ago of a stroke at 51, with a quieter and more private love. The love of someone who had been interrupted mid-sentence by a loss, and had spent 2 decades finishing the sentence alone. She spoke about the company, the way you speak about the thing that has been both salvation and sentence, with gratitude and with the particular exhaustion of someone who has carried something heavy for so long that they can no longer remember what their shoulders felt like before the weight. She spoke about all of this, on Friday afternoons and the occasional Tuesday evening, to a mechanic on Ogi Road who listened with the full attention of someone who understood, at some level he couldn't fully articulate, that being listened to was the one thing she could not buy or organize or instruct, and that she had been without it for longer than she had realized. I did not plan to fall in love with her. I do not think she planned to fall in love with me. These things happen the way engines fail, not all at once, but through a gradual accumulation of small changes that individually seem insignificant and collectively become the whole story. What I can say is that by the 10th month, the Friday visits were not about the fleet, and by the 12th month, they were not about anything except the particular honest space that had developed between 2 people who had arrived at each other from completely different directions and found in the arrival something that neither of them had been looking for, and that neither of them was willing to pretend was something smaller than it was. She had told me she was 63 on the afternoon she told me, with the specific directness she brought to everything she considered relevant information. I'm 63 years old, Emeka. You're 38. I want to say that clearly, so we are both working with accurate information. I had said, I know how old you are. She had said, and? I had said, and I'm here on a Friday afternoon having this conversation. What does that tell you? She had looked at me for a long moment. Then she had said, it tells me you're either very certain or very foolish. My father said those were often the same thing, I said. She had almost smiled, and we had both understood, without saying it in more words than that we were past the point where the information changed anything. The thing I had not known, the thing she told me in the kitchen on the November morning with the envelope on the table, was that she was sick. Not in the way that people are sick when they have something manageable. In the way that people are sick when they have something that has a trajectory, and the trajectory is not reversible, only slowed. A diagnosis she had received 6 weeks ago, confirmed 3 weeks ago by the second opinion she had flown to Abuja for. She had told no one except her personal physician and her estate lawyer. And now, me. The will had been revised 2 weeks ago. She had driven herself to her lawyer's office, not with the driver, not with the security, alone, in the practical Prado that the fleet manager kept service to her specification. and she had sat across from a man named Barrister Ifeanyi Ezeoke and told him what she wanted changed and why, and he had listened with the careful attention of someone who understood that what he was hearing was both legally significant and personally enormous, and he had prepared the revised documents, and she had signed them. She had not told her children. She had not told her board. She had told me. Not because I was the most important person in her life. She had 2 children and decades of relationships that preceded and exceeded what we were to each other. She told me because I was the person she trusted to hold it without doing anything with it, without calling lawyers or making decisions or trying to manage the situation or the people in it, just holding it. That was what she needed from me. And I held it. For 3 weeks I held it, while the children continued not knowing, while the board continued its quarterly planning, while the Enugu morning came through my workshop with the Harmattan dust and the particular sound of Ogwe Road doing what it did every day, the traffic, the generators, the bread sellers, the city moving through itself with complete indifference to the secret that a 63-year-old woman and a 38-year-old mechanic were holding between them in a kitchen with a pale morning light. I held it, and I waited, because she had asked me to wait, and because some things, the most important things, the truest things, deserve to be released at the right moment, rather than the convenient one. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 3 weeks later, on a day I had not been prepared for, from a direction I had not been watching. Chidi Okonkwo arrived at my workshop on a Thursday. He came in a company vehicle, one of the Abuja fleet, which meant he had driven down without telling his mother he was coming, which told me something immediately. People who announce their arrivals to their mothers do not need to arrive in company vehicles on unmarked Thursday mornings. He was a large man, 34 years old, with his father's broad shoulders and his mother's precise eyes. Though on Chidi, those eyes carried something that was not quite his mother's quality. Where Adaizi's eyes processed information with the speed of someone confident in their conclusions, Chidi's eyes had the quality of someone who was perpetually checking whether the conclusion they had arrived at was the right one. Not uncertainty exactly. Something more like the habit of a man who had grown up in the shadow of a conclusion his mother had already made and was always slightly behind it. He had a folder under his arm. He walked through the workshop entrance with the posture of someone who had prepared for this encounter. I came out of the service bay wiping my hands. He looked at the workshop the way his mother had never looked at it, with the assessment of someone deciding whether a place was worth the standing of the person they were there to discuss. He looked at me. "Emeka Obiora," he said. "Yes," I said. "Chidi." He had not expected me to use his first name. The slight adjustment in his posture told me that. "You know who I am," he said. "Your mother talks about you," I said. "Please come in." He came in. He sat in the plastic chair. He set the folder on the small table with the deliberateness of someone placing a document that is intended to be noticed. I sat across from him. "I'll be direct," he said. "Please," I said. "My mother has been spending time with you," he said. "More than a business relationship would explain. I've known about it for 4 months. I haven't said anything because I believed it was a phase that would resolve itself." He paused. "It hasn't resolved itself." "No," I said. He looked at me. "I'm not here to discuss your relationship with my mother. That's her business. What I'm here to discuss is something that affects the company and the family, and that you may or may not be aware of." I said nothing. He opened the folder. He placed a document on the table. "Our family's legal firm received an inquiry last week," he said. "From my mother's estate lawyer. It was a routine administrative matter, a filing that required coordination between the 2 firms. In the course of that communication, our lawyer received information that indicated a recent revision to my mother's estate documents." I looked at the document. It was a letter, formal, precise, the language of legal communication that says the minimum required and implies the maximum possible. The revision itself was not disclosed, Chidi continued. The existence of the revision was. Our firm has been the family's legal counsel for 18 years. They were not engaged in the revision. My mother used a different lawyer. He paused. A different lawyer for a revision of her own will, without informing her children or her board. He held my gaze. Do you know anything about this? The workshop sounds continued around us. Metal on metal somewhere in the back bay, the radio, the particular hum of the city outside. None of it adjusted to accommodate the weight of what was being asked. I looked at Chidi. I thought about what his mother had asked me. I thought about the envelope on the kitchen table, and the pale November light, and the 11 minutes of information that had changed the shape of everything I understood. I thought about my father, who had raised me to understand that honesty and loyalty were not opposites, that you could be honest without betraying the person who had trusted you, that there were truths that belonged to their owner, and truths that belonged to the moment, and the skill was knowing which was which. I know your mother, I said. What she's told me, she's told me. What she hasn't told me isn't mine to speculate about. Chidi looked at me with the expression of someone who has received an answer that is technically honest and functionally evasive, and knows it. That's a careful response, he said. It's an accurate one, I said. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the folder. He looked at the workshop around him. He looked at me. Mr. Obiora, he said, and the shift from first name to formal was deliberate. I'm going to say something directly, and I want you to hear it without taking offense where none is intended. He paused. My mother is 63 years old. She has built something significant. Her children, my sister and I, have spent our lives in the shadow of that thing. Not resentfully, but we have, and we have assumed, as her children, that we understood the shape of what we would inherit, not just financially, but in terms of how the decisions about this family get made. He looked at me. A mechanic on Ogie Road, he said quietly, is not someone who should be in a position to know things about this family that her children don't know. I held his gaze. Your mother decides who she trusts, I said. That's not something I can give you or take from you. That's hers. I know that, he said. I'm not asking you to give it to me. He leaned forward slightly. I'm asking you to understand that whatever you know, whatever she's told you, whatever position you think you occupy in her life, it comes with a cost. And the cost is paid by people who have known her longer than 14 months, and whose lives are more directly affected by her decisions than yours. He said 14 months without inflection, but the precision of it told me he had researched the timeline. I looked at him. I thought about his mother in the kitchen with the pale morning light. I thought about what she had asked. I hear what you're saying, I said, and I understand it. But I'm not going to have this conversation on her behalf. If you have things you need to say them to her. Chidi closed the folder. He stood. He looked at me with an expression that was more complicated than the one he had arrived with, more layered, less prepared, the expression of someone who has completed a calculated approach and found, at the end of it, a reality that didn't map to the calculation. She chose well, he said. It came out more quietly than he had intended, I think. And it was not a compliment. It was the specific observation of someone who has come to challenge a thing and found the thing more solid than expected. He left. I sat in the workshop for a long time after he was gone. Then I called Adaze. She answered on the second ring. Chidi came to see me, I said. A silence. I know, she said. He called me from the car on the way to you. Another silence. What did you tell him? Nothing, I said. A longer silence. Nothing, she repeated. Nothing that was yours to have told, I said. The silence that followed was different from the others. It had a quality I recognized from the kitchen with the envelope. The quality of someone who has been holding something alone and has just felt the weight distributed, even slightly. Emeka, she said. Yes. He's going to keep looking, she said. He's like me. He doesn't stop until he understands. I know, I said. When he finds out... She stopped. When he finds out, I said. Let it be from you. On your terms. At the right moment. She was quiet. Do you know what the right moment is? She said. Not yet, I said. But you'll know it when it comes. Another silence. I hope you're right, she said. I usually am about timing, I said. It's the one thing mechanics are never wrong about. She almost laughed. It was a small sound, brief and private. But it was there. And in a morning that had contained Chidi's folder and the workshop's sounds and the particular weight of being trusted with something enormous, that small sound was the most important thing I had heard. Ngozi arrived 2 weeks after her brother. She did not come to the workshop. She called. Her voice was different from her mother's and different from her brother's. Quicker, with the energy of someone whose mind moved faster than the conversation and who had learned, not entirely successfully, to wait for the conversation to catch up. She introduced herself with the precision of someone who suspected I knew who she was and wanted to confirm it while leaving room for the possibility that I didn't. I know who you are, I said. Good, she said. Then I don't have to explain the context. No, I said. I'm going to be honest with you, she said. I'd prefer that, I said. My brother came to see you, she said. He told me about the conversation. He said you said nothing useful. A pause. He said it with more respect than I expected him to say it. Your brother is a direct person, I said. He's a frightened person, she said. There's a difference. A pause. I'm also frightened, but I express it differently. She was quiet for a moment. Mr. Obiora, I'm not calling to threaten you or challenge you, or ask you to betray my mother's confidence. I'm calling because I'm her daughter, and I love her and something is wrong and I don't know what it is, and the not knowing is worse than any specific thing I can imagine. I sat with that. The honesty of it was complete and undefended. Not the strategic honesty of someone who has decided honesty is the most effective approach. The raw honesty of someone who has run out of strategy and is standing in what's actually true. I respected it. I can't tell you what your mother has told me, I said. But I can tell you this. Whatever is happening, she is handling it. She is handling it with the full capability she has always brought to everything she has handled. And she is not handling it alone. A silence. Are you handling it with her? Ngozi said. Yes, I said. Another silence. Longer. Is she all right? Ngozi said. And in those 4 words, stripped of everything else, was simply a daughter asking about her mother. I thought about the kitchen and the envelope and the pale morning light. I thought about the 11 minutes. I thought about what Adaze had asked me to hold. Call her, I said. Not about this. Just call her, the way you call someone when you want to hear their voice. A long silence. I haven't done that in a while, Ngozi said quietly. I know, I said. She knows too. The silence after that was different. Then Ngozi said, Thank you. She hung up. I sat in the workshop. Outside, the Enugu afternoon was doing what it did. The road noise, the generators, the bread sellers, the particular living texture of Ogi Road moving through its day, with complete indifference to the weight of what was being carried in the small office at the back of a workshop that most of the city had no reason to notice. I thought about what Adaze had said in the kitchen. I thought about the right moment. I looked at the tool wall where my father's tools still hung in the arrangement he had put them in 40 years ago, the arrangement I had never changed because it was right, and because some things are right, and the rightness is the reason to leave them alone. The right moment was coming. I could feel it the way I felt a fault developing in an engine, not the moment of failure, but the point before it, when the system was approaching a threshold that would force a change. The change was coming. What mattered was being ready for it. Adaisi called me on a Saturday morning 3 weeks after Ngozi's call. Her voice was different, not dramatically, not in the way that signals emergency, but different in the specific way of a voice that has made a decision and is calling to announce the decision rather than to discuss it. "I'm going to tell them," she said. "When?" I said. "This weekend," she said. "I've asked them both to come to Enugu. I told them it was a family matter that required a conversation in person." She paused. "Chidi assumed it was about the company. Ngozi assumed it was about you." "And it's neither," I said. "And it's both," she said. "And it's more than both." I said nothing. "I want you to be there," she said. I held the phone. "At the conversation?" I said. "At the house," she said. "Not in the room when I tell them, but at the house. So that after, when they have questions about what I've decided and why, you're there." I understood. She was not asking me to be a witness to the telling. She was asking me to be present for the aftermath. For the part after the room went quiet, and the children processed, and the questions arrived that she might not have the energy to answer alone. "I'll be there," I said. "Sunday afternoon," she said. "Come at 3. I'll tell them at 4. "All right," I said. A pause. "Emeka," she said. "Yes." "Thank you for the 3 weeks," she said, "for holding it without dropping it." "That's what I do," I said. "I fix things that are held wrong and hold things that need time before they can be fixed." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your father taught you that?" "My father taught me most things," I said. "The rest I learned from the engines." She almost laughed. The small, brief, private sound. "Sunday," she said. "Sunday," I said. She hung up. I put down the phone. The Enugu Saturday moved around the workshop in its usual way, indifferent and alive. And I sat in the small office with the tool wall and my father's arrangement and the particular quality of stillness that comes before something significant. Not dread, not excitement, but the specific, focused readiness of someone who has been preparing for a moment and can feel it arriving. Sunday was coming. The right moment was coming. And I was ready. The Sunday arrived the way Sundays arrive in Enugu in November, with the harmattan making the air thin and pale, and the light having that particular quality of something seen through gauze, soft and slightly distant, as if the world had turned down its own contrast for the day. I arrived at the house at 3 o'clock exactly, not early, not late. Adaise was a woman for whom precision in small things was a form of respect, and I had learned this about her the way I learned most things about the people who mattered to me, through careful observation rather than direct instruction. The gate opened before I could knock, which meant she had been watching for my truck. The housekeeper, a quiet woman named Mama Chioma, who had been with the family for 16 years and who had treated me, from my 3rd visit onward, with the specific, warm neutrality of someone who has decided a person is acceptable without being prepared to say so explicitly, led me through the entrance and into the sitting room. The house was what it had always been, large and specific, with the quality of a space that has been lived in rather than displayed. The furniture was good but not new. The photographs on the walls were personal rather than professional. The bookshelves held books that were organized by the logic of someone who actually read them, rather than by the logic of someone who wanted them to be seen. It smelled of the particular combination of polished wood and the cooking that Mama Chioma had been doing since morning. something with crayfish and palm oil that pressed warmly through the whole ground floor. Adaze was in the sitting room when I came in. She was dressed as she had been on the morning of the envelope, the dark blouse, the tailored trousers, the small gold earrings that she wore when she was going somewhere that mattered, and today the somewhere that mattered was here, in her own house, which told me everything about how she understood the weight of what this afternoon was. She looked at me when I came in. I looked at her. We did not say much. We had reached, over 16 months, the particular place in a relationship where the most significant communications happen below the level of speech, and what passed between us in that moment was both simple and complete. She was ready, and I was here, and those two facts were the ones that mattered. "They'll be here at 4, she said. "All right," I said. "I've thought about how to say it," she said. "I've been thinking about it for 3 weeks." "How are you going to say it?" I said. "Directly," she said, "the way I say everything." "Good," I said. She looked at the window. The harmattan light came through it in the same pale, gauzy way it came through everything that afternoon. "After I tell them," she said, "there will be questions about the will, about the changes, about why." She paused. "Some of those questions will be for you." "I know," I said. "Are you ready for them?" she said. I thought about Chidi in the plastic chair with his folder, about Ngozi's voice on the phone, stripped of strategy, asking the question that was underneath all the other questions, about the 3 weeks of holding something without dropping it. "Yes," I said. She nodded. We sat together in the sitting room with the harmattan afternoon pressing softly against the windows and the smell of Mama Chioma's cooking moving through the house. And we talked about ordinary things for the 45 minutes before her children arrived. A vehicle fault I had found in the fleet that week, a book she was reading, a news story about infrastructure development in the southeast that she had opinions about, the specific quiet comfort of two people who have learned to be present to each other without needing the presence to mean anything except what it is. At 3:58, a car pulled through the gate. At 4:01, another. They had arrived separately, which told me they had not coordinated the drive, which told me they were both coming to this house with their individual versions of what they expected to find, and that those versions were probably different from each other, and certainly different from what they were going to find. I stayed in the sitting room when Adaze went to greet them in the entrance. I heard voices, Chidi's, measured, with the specific register of someone managing an interaction they are uncertain about. Ngozi's, quicker, warmer on the surface, with the undercurrent of someone who has been worrying and is trying not to show the worrying, and Adaze's, calm, specific, the voice of someone who has decided exactly what this afternoon is and is holding it steady. They came into the sitting room. Chidi saw me first. His expression moved through recognition, and then calculation, and then a settling. The settling of someone who has arrived at a hypothesis about why I was here, and is deciding whether the hypothesis is correct. Ngozi saw me second, and her expression was different. More open, less calculated, the expression of someone who had spoken to me 3 weeks ago and had heard something in that conversation that had revised whatever she had previously thought about me. "Emeka," Adaeze said, "you know my children." "Chidi," I said. "Ngozi." Chidi nodded. Ngozi said, "Hello, Emeka." Simply, without performance. We sat. The sitting room arranged itself in the way rooms arrange themselves when the people in them are aware that something significant is about to happen, but have agreed, by mutual and unspoken consent, to maintain the surface of ordinary for a few minutes longer. Mama Chioma brought tea that nobody drank. The harmattan light continued its pale, gauzy work through the windows. And then Adaeze folded her hands on her knees, in the way she had in the kitchen with the envelope, and she looked at her children, and she began. She spoke for 27 minutes. I had heard most of it already. The diagnosis, The timeline, the prognosis that her doctors had described with the specific, careful language of people who have learned to communicate difficult trajectories without removing all hope, while not manufacturing hope that doesn't exist. I had heard the part about the will and the lawyer and the revision. I had heard the part about why she had chosen the moment she had chosen to do it. Not out of panic, but out of the specific clarity that comes when you receive information that makes the future concrete in a way it had never been before, and that clarity makes certain decisions suddenly obvious that had previously seemed complicated. What I had not heard was the part she added for her children specifically. The part about their father. She spoke about Obiora Okonkwo for the first time in all the conversations we had ever had with real specificity. Not the careful, private references she made when she was thinking out loud, but fully, as she must have spoken about him in the years before I knew her, when the loss was still recent enough to require language. She told them about the year he died, about the company as it had been then. Small, struggling, carrying debts that she had not known the full extent of, because he had been managing them alone in the way that men of his generation manage difficult things, privately and without asking for help. She told them about the 18 months after his death, when she had been simultaneously grieving and learning the company's true financial position and raising 2 children under 12 and negotiating with creditors who had assumed, as creditors often assume when a widow appears, that the debts would be easier to extract now that the man was gone. She had not let them extract anything. She had restructured. She had refinanced. She had made decisions that were not popular and that she had made anyway, because the alternative was losing everything her husband had started, and she was not willing to lose it. She told them this, not as a history they didn't know. They knew it in the broad outlines, but as a context for what she was about to say. I spent 22 years, she said, making decisions for this family, for the company, for both of you. Decisions that I believed were right, and that sometimes were right, and that sometimes were wrong in ways I didn't know until later. She looked at Chidi, then at Nosy. I made those decisions with the information I had, and the judgment I had developed, and the love I had for both of you, which has been consistent even when everything else has changed. She paused. The decisions I have made in the last 3 weeks are the same kind of decisions, made with full information, full judgment, and the same love. She looked at the table in front of her. I need you to receive them the same way. The room was very quiet. Chidi's hands were flat on his knees. He had the expression of someone who has been processing information in real time and has reached a point where the processing has produced something that his face was struggling to hold without showing. Ngozi was crying, not dramatically. The quiet, steady tears of someone who had been holding something for 3 weeks and had just been given permission to set it down. Daisy looked at her daughter. Something moved through her face. The specific, private movement of a mother who has watched her child cry and feels it in the deepest register of her body and is holding her own response with everything she has, because this is not the moment for her to come apart. Ngozi, she said. I knew something was wrong, Ngozi said. Her voice was steady despite the tears. 3 weeks ago when Emeka told me to call you, I knew, not what, but that something was wrong. I know, Daisy said. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Ngozi said. Not accusatory. The genuine question of someone who needed to understand. Because I needed to understand it myself first, Daisy said. Before I could give it to you in a way that was useful, rather than just frightening. She paused. I've spent my whole life giving you things in forms you could use. I wasn't going to stop now. Chidi had not said anything. He was looking at his hands. Then he looked up. His eyes were dry, but the expression behind them was not. It had the specific quality of someone who is keeping everything contained through the operation of a discipline that is costing him more than he is showing. How long? He said. The doctors won't be precise, Adazi said. They gave me a range. The lower end of the range is 12 months. The upper end is significantly more if the treatment responds well. She paused. I intend to respond well to the treatment. Chidi nodded. He nodded the way his mother nodded. Once, decisively, the nod of someone who has received information and has decided what to do with it. All right, he said. Not as a dismissal, as an acceptance. The specific, difficult acceptance of someone who has decided to receive a hard truth without fighting it, because fighting it would not change it, and would cost energy that was needed elsewhere. He looked at me. I held his gaze. You've known for 3 weeks, he said. Yes, I said. And you held it, he said. She asked me to, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, with a precision that contained more layers than its surface suggested, she chose well. The same words he had said at the workshop. But different now. Completely different in what they meant. The questions about the will came after the initial silence had passed, and the tea had been replaced with something stronger that Mama Chioma brought without being asked, because 16 years in a house teaches you what a room needs before it knows to ask. Adais presented the revised document. Not the full document. The summary that her lawyer had prepared, the outline of what had changed and what had remained the same and why. The original will had distributed the estate in the way that most family estates in her position were distributed. The company in trust to the eldest child, the properties divided, the liquid assets allocated according to a formula that had made sense when it was written, and that had, over the years, become a structure that no longer reflected the actual dynamics of the family or the company. The revision was different. She walked them through it with the clarity she brought to board presentations. Precisely, without unnecessary softening, with the specific respect of someone who believed her children were adults, capable of receiving accurate information rather than managed versions of it. The company was restructured under an independent professional board, with both children holding equal non-executive positions and equal shareholding. No one child was designated to run it. The running of it would be a professional responsibility held by the management team she had spent 15 years building, and that was, in her assessment, more than capable of continuing without the family's operational involvement. There was a foundation. The Obiora Okonkwo Foundation, named for their father, funded by a portion of the estate, dedicated to small business development in Enugu State, the specific, practical support for people building things on streets without names, the support that had not existed when their father was building his, and that she had decided, in the clarity of her diagnosis, was the most important thing she could leave behind. And there was one more provision. She told them about it last. She looked at me when she said it. A trust, established in my name, funded by a portion of the estate that was separate from both the company distribution and the foundation funding. Not large, not the scale of what went to the children or the foundation, but significant. Specifically designated for the expansion and endowment of the vocational training program I had been running informally out of the workshop for 3 years. The trust was not for me. It was named the Chukwuemeka Obiora Vocational Trust. Intended to establish a formal training center in Enugu that would offer free mechanical and technical training to young people from underserved communities, with my workshop as the founding location. She had not told me this part. I sat very still. The sitting room was quiet. Chidi was looking at the summary document. Ngozi was looking at her mother. I was looking at the window, at the harmattan light that was beginning to deepen toward the particular amber of late afternoon, and I was aware of something in my chest that was not quite emotion, and not quite the absence of emotion, but something that existed in the space between. The specific, weighted feeling of being seen by someone in a way that you had not anticipated, and that landed more precisely than anything you had been prepared for. "You didn't tell me," I said. "No," she said. I wanted to tell you in this room, with them here. I looked at her. Why? I said. Because it's not just about you, she said. It's about what you represent in this story. And I wanted my children to understand that before the lawyers explain it in documents. She looked at Chidi, at Ngozi. Emeka did not come into my life looking for anything. He has never asked me for anything. He has been present and honest. And he has held things that were not his to carry without once using what he knew to make himself more comfortable or more important. She paused. That is not a common quality. In my experience, it is the rarest quality there is. She looked at me. The trust is not payment. It's recognition. There's a difference. The room was quiet. Chidi set down the summary document. He looked at me with an expression that had moved over the course of this afternoon, through every stage of its evolution. The suspicion of the workshop visit, the guarded respect of the sitting room entrance, the acknowledgement of she chose well, and now something that was simpler and more complete than any of those stages. The training program, he said. How many people has it helped so far? 41 graduates in 3 years, I said. 34 employed in technical fields. 4 have opened their own operations. He nodded slowly. My grandfather, he said, started from nothing in this city. My father started from almost nothing. My mother built from what my father left. He paused. There's a pattern in this family. He looked at me. You fit the pattern. I said nothing. Ngozi said, The foundation is named for Papa. Yes, Adaeze said. Ngozi looked at her mother. He would have liked that. I know, Adaeze said. He would have liked all of it, Ngozi said. She looked at me. He was the kind of man who fixed his own car. Mama always made him take it to the mechanic because she said he made it worse. But he liked knowing how things worked. She paused. He would have sat in your workshop for hours. I think we would have gotten along, I said. She smiled. It was the first smile in the room since the afternoon had begun. Small, real. The specific smile of someone who has been carrying grief and worry for 3 hours and has found, in an unexpected corner of the afternoon, something that is not grief. Chidi looked at his sister, then at his mother, then, finally, at me with the full gaze of someone who has arrived at a conclusion after a long journey and is standing in it completely. I came to your workshop 4 weeks ago, he said, with a folder and a prepared argument. I remember, I said. I was wrong, he said. Not with difficulty, the way people say it when it costs them. With the specific ease of someone who has processed the wrongness thoroughly and has arrived at the saying of it as a natural conclusion. Not wrong to be concerned, but wrong about what the concern should have been. He paused. I was concerned about what you might take from this family. I should have been paying attention to what you were already giving it. The room held the words. The harmattan afternoon held them too. And in the sitting room of Adaeze Okonkwo's house, with the gold light coming through the windows and the smell of Mama Chioma's cooking still warm in the air, 4 people sat in the particular silence of a moment that has arrived at what it was always travelling toward. Not resolution, because resolution is too clean a word for what real things become. But arrival. The specific arrival of truth in the right room at the right time, finally allowed to be exactly what it was. The weeks that followed were not simple. I want to be honest about that. Adaeze began treatment the week after the Sunday conversation, at a facility in Abuja that her doctors had recommended, with a protocol that required her to spend 3 weeks of every month away from Enugu. The logistics of this, the company continuity, the family coordination, the sheer organizational weight of managing a significant health challenge while maintaining the appearance of normalcy that she insisted on in professional settings, were enormous. She did not manage them alone. Chidi reorganized his schedule to cover the Abuja operations from a satellite office closer to the treatment facility. He did this without being asked, which told me something about who he actually was underneath the folder and the prepared argument, someone who, when the situation required it, knew how to put down the calculation and simply be present. Ngozi flew from Lagos twice a month. She and her mother had the specific difficult conversations that daughters and mothers have when time has become concrete rather than assumed. Conversations about what was said, and what was unsaid, and what had been meant, and what had been misunderstood. And they had them with the honesty that only urgency produces. And what came out of those conversations was not resolution, but something better. Understanding. The specific, earned understanding of two people who have decided that the time for managing each other is over, and the time for seeing each other clearly has finally arrived. I drove to Abuja on the weeks Adaeze was there, when I could manage the workshop schedule to allow it. I did not stay for long visits. She was tired in ways that were not always visible on her face, but that I had learned to read in the quality of her attention. The way her hands rested differently, the specific cadence of her breathing when she had been in treatment, and her body was working in a register that was separate from her considerable will. I stayed for what was useful. I brought things from Enugu that she mentioned without meaning to, a specific bread from the bakery near the workshop that she had described once as tasting of Saturday mornings, a book she had been in the middle of, the particular coffee that Mama Chioma made and that no other coffee quite replicated. Small things. But she had told me once, on a Friday afternoon in the workshop, that small things done consistently were the only things that lasted. I believed her. She was right about most things. Barrister Ifeanyi Ezeoki came to the workshop in January. He was a precise man, 60 years old, with the specific quality of estate lawyers who have spent their careers inside other people's most significant moments, a quality of careful neutrality that was not coldness, but professionalism, the demeanor of someone who understood that his role was to serve the document rather than to have opinions about it. He came because Adaeze had asked him to come, and because the formal establishment of the Chukwuemeka Obiora Vocational Trust required my signature on several documents that could not be handled by proxy. He sat across from me in the workshop office with his briefcase on the table and his papers arranged in the specific order of someone who does not leave the sequence of documents to chance. He walked me through each document. I read every page. He watched me read with the patient expression of someone who had presented documents to many people and had learned that the ones who actually read were a specific kind of person. When I was done, he said, "Mrs. Okonkwo was specific about the purpose of the trust. She wanted me to explain it to you in my own words, in addition to the legal language." "Please," I said. He looked at the window for a moment, at the Ogwi Road moving past it in its usual way. "She said," he began carefully, "that when she was building the company, in the years after her husband's death, there was no one who offered practical support to people doing what she was doing. No accessible funding, no training infrastructure, no recognition that what she was building had value before it was large enough to be worth recognizing." He paused. "She said the trust is what she wished had existed when she was starting, and she wanted it to exist in the name of a man who built something honest on a road that didn't have a formal name, because she believed those were the people it was most likely to help." He looked at me. "She also said," he continued, "that you would probably be uncomfortable with the scale of what the trust represents, and that you should know she considered that discomfort and decided it was not a sufficient reason to reduce the provision." I almost smiled. "She knows me," I said. "She knows everyone she pays attention to," he said. "In my 30 years of practice, I have never had a client who paid closer attention to people." He paused. "It shows in the document. Every provision has a specific person's specific need behind it." He looked at his papers. This trust has yours. I looked at the signature page. My full name printed in the formal font of legal documents. Chukwuemeka Obiora, the name my mother had given me. The name that was too many syllables for a Tuesday morning. I signed. The training center opened 8 months later, on a Thursday morning in September, on a plot 2 streets from the original workshop that had been secured with trust funding, and that had taken 4 months of construction and 2 months of curriculum development, and the specific, exhausting, completely necessary work of building something real rather than something that looked like something real. It was not large. A single building, functional, with 6 service bays and a classroom and a tools inventory that was better than anything I had started with, and that I had sourced with the care of someone who understood that the quality of the tools was a message to the students about how seriously the work was being taken. A Daisy was there. She had insisted on being there. Her doctors had approved the trip from Abuja. The treatment was progressing with what they called cautious optimism, which was the language of people who had learned not to overpromise, but who were, underneath that language, genuinely encouraged. She looked different from the woman who had sat across from me in the kitchen with the pale November light, thinner in ways the treatment had required, with a tiredness that she managed, but could not fully conceal. But her eyes were the same. The processing speed, the specific quality of full attention that she brought to everything she considered worth attending to, those were unchanged. She sat in the front row of the ceremony, between Chidi and Ngozi. Chidi had flown in from Abuja the night before. Ngozi had driven from Lagos with her husband and her 2-year-old daughter, who fell asleep on Chidi's shoulder 20 minutes into the proceedings, and who Chidi held with the specific, slightly surprised tenderness of a man discovering he was better with children than he had thought. Barrister Ezeoki was there. He sat near the back, with the expression of someone who has helped build many things over 30 years, and finds that the things he has helped build are among the most satisfying aspects of a satisfying career. My mother was there. She was 67 years old, with my father's eyes and her own opinions about everything, and she sat beside Adaize with the specific ease of 2 women who had met 3 months ago and had recognized in each other, without needing to discuss it, a quality of directness that made their rapport immediate and unforced. The 2 of them had talked for 4 hours the first time they met, about things I was not party to, and when my mother had come to find me afterward, she had said only, "She's good people, Emeka. Your father would have said the same." That was the whole review. It was enough. I spoke at the ceremony. I did not have notes. I had thought about what I wanted to say for weeks, and I had decided that what I wanted to say was true and simple and did not require notes. I said, "My father built this workshop on a road that didn't have a name. He built it with tools he had bought one at a time over 12 years, and with the understanding that the work was the answer to most questions. He raised me in this workshop, and he left it to me when he couldn't run it anymore. And I have kept it the way he built it, because some things are built right the first time, and the rightness is the reason to leave them alone." I looked at the room. This center exists because a woman I love decided that what my father built deserved to be larger than one building on one road. She decided that the people who build things on roads without names deserve the same support as the people who build things in glass towers. And she put that decision in a document and signed it and sent a lawyer to my workshop to make it real. I paused. I did not ask for it. I would not have asked for it. But I am grateful for it in a way that I don't have the right words for, and so I will say it simply. Thank you. I looked at Adaize. She held my gaze with the expression she had on Sunday mornings and quiet evenings, and all the ordinary moments that had accumulated into something that was ours. "The 47 young people who make up our first cohort," I said, "are going to learn what my father taught me. Not just how to fix an engine, why an engine breaks, the difference between fixing what is broken and understanding what breaks. That difference is the whole thing. That difference is what this center is for." I sat down. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Chidi started the applause, and the room followed, and it was the specific applause of people who have just heard something true said simply and are expressing their recognition of the truth rather than their appreciation of the performance. Adaize was not clapping. She was looking at me with the expression that I had learned to read over 17 months. The expression that existed below the level of words and that said everything that the words would have said if she had been a different kind of person. She had always been this kind of person, saying the necessary things without saying them. I understood. I always had. The first cohort began training the following Monday. 47 students, ages 16 to 28, from 11 different neighborhoods across Enugu and the surrounding areas. They came with different histories and different levels of prior knowledge and the specific combination of hunger and wariness that young people from those neighborhoods carry. The hunger of people who have been told that something is available to them, and the wariness of people who have been told that before and found out it wasn't. I taught the first session myself. I stood in the new classroom with 47 faces in front of me, and the smell of new paint and engine oil mixing in the air, and I said the same thing I had been saying, in different forms, since my father said it to me when I was 9 years old, and standing in the original workshop watching him work. An engine tells you everything, I said, if you know how to listen. A girl in the second row, 16 years old, from a neighborhood that was 3 bus rides from this center, looked at me with the specific expression of someone who has been told things before and has not yet decided whether this particular thing is worth believing. I recognized the expression. I had worn it myself. You don't have to believe me yet, I said. Just listen. The engine will prove it. By the end of the session, she was the one asking the questions that pushed the class forward. Her name was Uchenna. 6 months later, she was the top student in the cohort. I did not tell anyone this specifically. It was her achievement. But I thought about it, driving back to the original workshop one evening through the Enugu roads, in the way that you think about things that have confirmed something you needed to have confirmed. Not a surprise, but a proof. The proof that what you were building was worth building. That the work was the answer. That the work was always the answer. 2 years after the kitchen with the envelope, Adaize's treatment reached a point that her doctors described as stable remission. They were careful with the language. They were always careful with the language. But underneath the carefulness was something genuine. A cautious, specific, real relief that her body had responded to the treatment in ways they had hoped for, and that the trajectory that had seemed fixed was no longer entirely fixed. She called me from Abuja the evening the doctors gave her the update. Her voice was the same voice. The directness, the specific quality of full attention. And underneath it, something that I had not heard from her in 2 years. Something that was not quite lightness, because she was not a light person in that sense, but something that corresponded to lightness. The specific quality of someone who has been carrying a concrete weight, and has just been told that the concrete was not as final as it had seemed. The doctors are cautiously optimistic, she said. I know what that means, I said. It means they're not saying what they're actually thinking, she said. What are they actually thinking? I said. That it's working, she said. Simply, without inflation. I sat with that. The Enugu evening moved through the workshop around me. The road outside was doing what it did. The tools were on the wall in my father's arrangement. The training center 2 streets away was closed for the evening, but would be open in the morning, with 47 young people arriving to learn why engines break, rather than just how to fix them. Come home, I said. A silence. I'm coming home next week, she said. Come home now, I said. Another silence. Then, Emeka. Yes. You cannot be serious. I'm always serious, I said. It's the one thing I'm consistent about. She almost laughed, the small, brief, private sound. I had been waiting for it. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, I said. She hung up. I sat in the workshop with the evening coming through the open door and the city moving around me with its indifferent, constant, living energy. The bread sellers and the generators and the road noise and all the ordinary machinery of a place that was always building. And I thought about 14 months ago, and a woman who had sat in a plastic chair and watched work being done and had asked questions that were not about the work. I thought about a kitchen and a pale November light and an envelope with my full name written on it. I thought about a Sunday afternoon and a sitting room and a room that had gone quiet in the right way, at the right time, for the right reasons. I thought about 47 young people learning to listen to engines. I thought about my father, building on a road without a name, leaving behind tools in an arrangement that I had never changed because the arrangement was right. Some things are built right the first time. The rightness is the reason to leave them alone. And some things, the things that are built slowly between two people, in workshops and kitchens and hospital rooms and sitting rooms with harmattan light coming through the windows, those things are built right too. Not easily, not quickly, but right. And the rightness, when it arrives, is not something you announce. It is something you simply live in. The way you live in a room that has finally become what it was always supposed to be. 3 years after the envelope, the training center had completed its third cohort. 119 graduates in total. 87 employed in technical fields. 11 had opened their own operations. 2 had started their own workshops, on streets that may or may not have had formal names, with tools they had bought one at a time. Uchenna, who had been the top student of the first cohort, was teaching the third. She taught the way I taught, without notes, with the specific conviction of someone who had learned something true and wanted to pass it on accurately. When I watched her in the classroom, I saw my father in her. Not the physical resemblance, but the quality of attention, the way she listened to the students' questions before answering them. The specific patience of someone who understood that understanding took the time it took and couldn't be rushed into a shape it wasn't ready for. I told her once that she was a natural teacher. She said, "I had a natural teacher." I did not know what to say to that, so I went back to work, which was the right response. The work was always the right response. On the evening of our third anniversary, we marked it from the Thursday of the kitchen with the envelope, because that was the morning everything became what it actually was. Adeze and I sat in the garden of the Enugu house, and the November harmattan was beginning its approach, and the evening was the specific warm cool of the harmattan's early arrival. And she had her coffee, and I had mine, and the city was its usual enormous and indifferent self beyond the garden walls. She was looking at the garden. "Do you remember the workshop?" she said. "The first Friday I came not for the fleet." "Yes," I said. "I sat in that plastic chair," she said. "And you walked me through the service schedule for every vehicle in the fleet. And at the end of the 90 minutes, you asked if I had any other questions. And you said no," I said. "And you said, 'Then I'll see you next Friday.'" I looked at her. "I did." "You did," she said. "You said it as if it was already decided." "It was," I said. She looked at me. "You knew," she said. "I knew the conversation wasn't finished," I said. "I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew it wasn't finished." She was quiet. "When did you know what it was?" she said. I thought about it honestly. "The Tuesday with the suya," I said, "when you forgot to go home." She looked at me. "I didn't forget," she said. "I know," I said. She almost smiled. "You knew then too," she said. "Yes," I said. She shook her head slowly. The specific small shake of someone who finds something both predictable and surprising at the same time. "You are the most certain man I have ever met," she said. "I learned it from the engines," I said. "Either a thing is working, or it isn't. Either the diagnosis is right, or it isn't. You don't benefit from being uncertain about what you actually know." She looked at the garden. And us? She said. Were you ever uncertain? I thought about it honestly. No, I said. She turned to look at me. Not once, she said. Not once, I said. About this, about what it was. I paused. About whether other people would understand it? Yes. About what it was? No. She was quiet for a long time. Then she reached across and took my hand. The garden was warm and quiet around us, with the harmattan beginning to press at the edges of the evening and the Enugu night coming in with its particular sounds. The generators, the road, the faint music from somewhere in the neighborhood, the ordinary beautiful texture of a city that was always building and always moving, and that had never once needed anyone's permission to be exactly what it was. I thought about the envelope on the kitchen table, about the pale November light, about the secret that only the mechanic knew. Not a secret anymore. Now it was a training center with 119 graduates. A foundation named for a man who had built something honest and left it unfinished. A sitting room where a mother had told her children the truth and watched them receive it. A garden where two people sat in the harmattan evening, exactly where they were supposed to be, not because anyone had planned it, and not because it had been easy, but because the work had been done honestly, and the truth had been held carefully, and the right moment had arrived and been used. The mechanic had known why, and why had turned out to be the most important thing of all. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of Emeka's patience, Adaizi's courage, and the particular beauty of a secret kept for the right reasons, then subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to believe that trust is real and that the people who earn it quietly are the ones worth keeping. Leave a comment telling us which moment stayed with you longest, because the next story is already waiting, and it begins, as the best ones always do, with a secret that only one person knows. And that person is exactly the right person to know it. Stay with us.